Baruchim habaim ledikduk dakot. This grammar video is on the Vav-Consecutive. Vav-consecutives are a peculiar verb form, very unique, actually, to ancient biblical Hebrew. It's composed by taking an imperfect verb form and using that in a unique way to tell stories. It's almost always used to narrate some sort of event, generally from the past. Almost always, the Vav-Consecutive appears in third-person forms. Something like 95% or more of them in the Bible are third-person narration. So they're used by the narrator in biblical stories to describe action that's happening while it happens. The action as it's unfolding in the story. You may wonder why it's called a Vav-Consecutive. If you wonder that, I would say that's a great question. And the answer is twofold. The Vav is called a Vav-Consecutive because it's created by adding a Vav to an imperfect verb form. A three-letter root that has a prefix attached to the beginning of it. It's called Vav-Consecutive because it's used to narrate consecutive actions as they unfold in a biblical story. So, Vav-Consecutive. The name actually helps, it's descriptive and explanatory. It describes how it's formed and what function it has. So it's a helpful name. Another name for it is the mesaper. That's simply the modern Hebrew word for narrator. Vav-consecutives are pretty easy to identify once you know what you're looking for. So there are 3 signs to every Vav-consecutive. The 3 signs are, well, the first thing to remember is that they only happen with imperfect verb forms. Only imperfect. But the 3 signs are the presence of a Vav attached to the very beginning. That Vav will be followed by a patach, and there will be a dagesh forte in the prefix. Let me give you some examples here. Here we have the verb yomer. Yomer. This is a third masculine singular imperfect verb form, which we would translate generally in the present or the future. So imperfect means that action is either ongoing or about to begin, because the prefix is attached to the beginning of the root. Action is beginning. So we would translate this something like, he says or he will say. But if we attach the 3 signs of the Vav-consecutive to it, Vav, patach, and a dagesh forte in the prefix, then a very interesting thing happens. Grammarians will tell you that what happens is that the tense flips. So what was generally a future tense or a present tense becomes a past tense. So we would translate this, and he said, instead of he will say or says, and he said. So the Hebrew storytellers are using this peculiar verb form to tell their ancestral stories from the past. But keep in mind, it's an incomplete verb form. Let's do another example. Here we have the feminine singular version of this word, tomer. If we add all 3 signs, superimpose this dagesh forte over the dagesh lene that was in the tav prefix, now we have vatomer. Vatomer. And she said. Now there's one peculiar thing that happens with, as far as I know, all Vav-consecutive forms when you have a lamed hey verb. That is to say, a verb that's final root letter in the 3rd root position is a hey. When you have that situation like the verb here, yihyeh, it will be, or it will become, or it will happen, if you add the Vav and the patach and the dagesh forte, the hey on the end will fall off or disappear. And this is modified slightly. And you get the ubiquitous verb form vayehi, and it happened, or in the old King James, and it came to pass. So, and it was, let's say. So remember, the Vav-Consecutive is formed by taking an imperfect verb form, talking about future or present action that has not come to an end, add the addition of the Vav, Patach, and Dagesh Forte in the prefix, and it flips. Now it's describing something that happened in the past. But the interesting question, I think, is why would the people of Israel have narrated their stories from the past, their ancestors' experiences of the presence of God? Why would they narrate those stories using incomplete verb forms? As if the action somehow was not ended, that perhaps every time they told the story it happened again in some fundamental way. I don't know, it's curious. What do you think? Lech l'shalom.